Welcome to the Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by the Gimp. Now that guy knows how to party. Let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to the Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Dozie's Market. Fully stocked every day with very crisp lettuce. Shop at Dozie's Market. Here at Stars Hollow. Welcome everyone to the Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers. We like to study film, analyze it, review it, see if we can learn anything or not. Or, happy Billy Madison style, just be dumber for the effort. Who knows? It's always a gamble.
You never know what you're going to get with us.
You really don't. And speaking of what we're going to get today, what are we covering, man?
Today we are covering City of God. So if you haven't seen this film, please pause this episode and go watch it. We're going to spoil a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, we'll try to look at a handful of things. Definitely touch on some of the cinematography, discuss the contrast, perspective, and dive into some of the story and writing, so to speak, voiceover, titles, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. In the slums of Rio, two kids' paths diverge as one struggles to become a photographer and the other a kingpin. It's directed by, and I'm going to butcher all of these names. We talked about this before.
Godspeed.
Godspeed, young man. It's directed by Fernando Meirelles, sure, and Kátia Lund. Screenplay by Bráulio Mantovani. It's based on the novel by Paulo Lins. Cinematography by César Charlone. It's featuring Alexandre Rodrigues as Rocket, Leandro Firmino as Lil Z, Alice Braga as Angelica, Phellipe Haagensen as Benny, Seu Jorge as Knockout Ned, and Matheus Nachtergaele as Carrot. So close.
All you Brazilians, why can't you have names like John?
I'm sure they do, but then it's John Nachtergaele.
Yeah. That's awesome, man.
Which is beautiful.
It really is. It really is. Like, John is a great name. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot more flavor.
Hard for us
Struggle
North American
city.
folk.
I have a German last name that it's Heidenreich. I swear I didn't know how to spell it until third grade. I was 8 years old.
I believe that.
I kept a little slip of paper. We had a book fair, and my sister wrote my name on it, to order books that I couldn't buy. And so I just ended up keeping the slip in my desk. And every time I had to write my name, I just referred to that until eventually I just remembered which letters go where.
Can I be honest with you?
Yeah.
I didn't know how to spell it until about 5 years into our friendship. So
I'm impressed you know how to spell it. So
I do.
Well done, sir. Speaking of writing and spelling, I'm not sure like the education that our guys got in the City of God was of a literary one. And so watching all this violence was a bit of a shock. I haven't seen this in like 10 years, and diving back into it, I was like, oh my God. I honestly thought most of this movie was about him being a photographer, and that's just like the last 20 minutes. Like this, in my mind, it was the entire thing. Like, okay, 30 minutes he gets going, and then it's about him trying to get these shots or whatever. And whoa, was I way off. And so I still had some idea coming in, but I think you'd only seen City of Men, the sequel. And so this was your first time going back to the OG. What was this experience like for you?
Oh man. Okay. Well, it was incredible. It feels like the definition of filmmaking to me in so many ways. I mean, the cinematography is pointed at times. We start off with this chase of a chicken in the city streets. So, and then we do a jump back years before, but there are some shots in that sequence where you're from the perspective of the chicken, right? Or you're on the chicken's back and the chicken is running around, or, you're looking directly at the chicken's face as it's running at you. And the first thing I thought of this entire movie was, how the hell did they do that? How the hell did they fake a chicken? which was an interesting start to something that turned into such like egregious violence. It was crazy. It reminded me of 70s gangster films, like, but there's just no forgiveness. And I mean, thank you for the heads up on the kid violence. That was brutal. I thought that as much as I love this movie, I didn't think that was necessary, but if they felt that it was necessary, I thought they did it tastefully as they needed to. You don't see it happen. You can't even see it. You just see like the slumped over body, like out of focus. Whereas everything else, they show it. They just straight up like, here's a body, here's a body, here's a body. And they're not afraid to do that. So you could tell that it was not trying to be egregious about it. It was trying to say this happened, because I don't think that we know at the beginning that it's based on a true story or based on true events. Maybe we do.
Point.
I don't remember if it says that. And I know it says it at the end, but
for sure at the end. But you're right. I don't think, unless you just know going in, there's no reason to watch this assuming that this is all real events.
Yeah, I didn't. Although it felt so real. I mean, I thought that they, we've talked about it on this podcast before too. Filming black men at night is really difficult to do from a cinematography perspective, and I think that they did that unbelievably well. And I think that they needed to know how to do that going in, and they knew that, and so they planned for that. But every shot was important. It was a long movie. I was ready for it to be over 2 hours into it, not because I didn't want to stay in the story or with the people, but I was just exhausted. I was like, oh my gosh, I just can't deal with all the killing all the time. And I thought that also the way that they laid out the story was brilliant. When they go do the heist at the hotel and then everybody's dead, we don't know that it's Lil, what's his name?
Lil Z?
When he's
Lil Dice. Yeah.
Little Dice, that's what it was. We don't know that it was Little Dice until later on in the movie, like, I don't know, a third into the movie.
Yeah.
And then we find it out and we see the flashback and he's enjoying it, and you're just thinking, oh my God, what is this kid going to be like when he grows up? And then boom, there you go. Or maybe we've already seen him grow up and then the flashback. I don't remember, but it tells you, it shows you, oh my God, his whole life he has been just killing for fun. This guy is going to be unforgiving. And so I settled into my chair. I was like, okay, here we go. There's going to be a lot more death. Here we go. And of course there was. I thought the narration was fantastic. The acting was otherworldly. I mean, there have only been a handful of films really where I did not see an actor for one moment in the movie. And not a single moment did I think, oh, this is somebody acting. Somebody yelled action, somebody yelled cut. Not a moment. Every single moment was so freaking real. I mean, to the point where it felt voyeuristic at times, and maybe that's why I felt uncomfortable half the time. So, and then, the scene in the apartment where they show the history of the apartment. Oh my God. Where they just set the camera up and then people fade in and out and situations happen and the lighting changes and stuff. I mean, they had to plan that for so long because you can leave the camera there, and not move it. But you don't want a bunch of downtime in between setups where you're figuring out what the next thing is going to be. You have to plan this stuff out. Where's the lighting going to come from? And I thought they did that brilliantly. And it really set up, it really set us up as a viewer of knowing why this guy now is running the show, which I forgot which kid it was, but why this kid is now running the show in that apartment. That Lil Z then goes in and steals from him. Is it Benny?
Blackie,
that's who it is. Yeah, Blackie. So it's just a beautiful setup for that. And then Lil Z comes in and takes over, but now we have the backstory. But it's so perfect. He knocks, they freak out, and then we get this he comes in, then we get the backstory, and then he knocks again, and he comes in. And so we're just given everything we need when we need it. And they do a really good job of using flashbacks to do that, and narration, which is really hard to do. And it might be easier because it's another language and it's subtitled. And so I can't hear if the performance of the narration necessarily is like lacking or if it's good. I'm assuming that it's good because literally everything else in this movie is good, is great, is fantastic, is top notch. So anyway, fantastic film all around. Cinematography, directing, acting, writing, storytelling, the arc of everything. It just absolutely masterfully executed.
Yeah, it has everything. Like, I don't know how much more you need out of a movie, out of a story anyway. It's got, revenge, and it's got brotherhood, these deep bonds, and it's got literal brotherhood, deep friendship, romance and heartbreak, and fear of death, and conquering your fear. Everything I would think you could cram into a movie, they do it seamlessly. Like, you don't feel like you're going through those beats. You're just experiencing those moments with these characters. Whether that's him, falling in love with Angelica and then getting his heart broke a little bit. Like, we feel bad for him whenever she peels off and gets with Benny. But at the same time, there's no bad blood between him and Benny because everyone loves Benny. And so watching Rocket kind of cope with that, you also love him a little bit more just for not taking it personal. Like, you're bummed for him. He's bummed. But then he just recovers. He's like, you know what? It's Benny. And you see them at the party together, and he just kind of waves, and it's nothing but good vibes, And that's just one sliver of this moment kind of sprinkled in here and there. Like, there's so much happening. And everything you said, half of it I've written in my notes. Like, we couldn't be more on the same page. Like, the performances, at times, like when that kid gets shot in the foot, I just lose my mind. Because you're like, what did they do to this kid? Like,
I don't know, but he is he is crying like he really got shot. I was blown away. You know what I said out loud when that happened? I said, "Where is your mother?" like his real mother. Like, how could she let them do this to you, buddy? Anyway.
His performance is so good, and it is a performance. Like, I was just curious. I was like, how did they? I can't be the only one wondering how that kid performed that way. Like, did they actually shoot him with a BB gun? Like, what happened here? And thankfully, no, they didn't do anything to this kid at all. It was the acting coach. She talks about how she gave him some cues, and it's like, just imagine, go for it. Imagine there's a toothache and it's making its way down to your foot. And, and I don't know how good of a cue that is necessarily. Like, I wouldn't know what to do with that as a full grown adult, like, let alone as a kid. And when they called action, he just went ham like it. And afterwards, after they wrapped the scene, she ran over and gave him a big hug. It's like, what? Well, amazing. So she was just really excited for him to find that gear. And
that's
it's just
incredible.
It's so amazing.
Interesting. That is a really interesting cue. A toothache that makes its way down to your foot. I mean, you cry with your head. So if your foot hurts, it's hard to get your eyes to maybe cry. But if it starts in your head and then moves down.
Yeah.
I was just trying to think, like, why would you cue a child to do that? Like, it's interesting.
It's pretty cool.
It's good to know they didn't shoot him.
Yeah. He's got all his toes.
That research.
I just had to know. And there's so much more of this movie that I really want to dive into. It's been a really well known, like, in the film community of like, like these guys, this team, I should say, because Kátia and Fernando, co-directed this thing and did such a crazy job that watching it, I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking, there's no way this entire thing was storyboarded. Like, maybe. I mean, to be fair, maybe they storyboarded every frame of this thing. Honestly, don't know. But from the outside looking in, I'm thinking there's certain sequences that they have a very precise idea of what they're going to do. And then there's other sequences where it feels like they're just throwing it all away. They're like, okay, we plan to do this, but now we're in this location. Let's shoot this. And this is a sequence that's going to cut together. We only need one shot and we're going to do that. And this is a cool looking angle. Let's just do it all in frame right here. And what else do we need? Okay, yeah, how can we talk? It feels a little bit like we're going to stay inspired. We have a game plan, but we're also going to be open to inspiration. Or maybe that's just the convenience of having three people thinking about this thing from soup to nuts. Fernando, Kátia, and César. Like, you have everyone thinking about how, but here's what messes me up is, fine, you're going in and shooting this, but an editor has to put all this together. And it's just a masterful job of editing. It's absolutely astounding to me, because everything you said is so on point about you're telling the story and you knowing when to jump forward and when to jump back and when to pause and when to freeze. And it feels like there was just this incredible mind meld between the editors maybe, and the directors and the cinematographer. Like all four of them plus had to have just been sharing one brain. Because and the reason I say that isn't because as an editor, you get in, you're just working with the footage you have, and you're like, okay, here's this moment, here's the story we're trying to tell, fine. But as a cinematographer, to be able to trust that the editor is going to understand what you're doing with some of these compositions and with some of these, the way you're shooting the scene, because I feel like a lot of cinematographers are overly safe. They go into a scene, they're going to be like, I want to make sure we understand what's happening in this frame. And so we're going to frame a little wider than necessary. And here it's just chaos. It feels like, okay, we're going to get a master, but then you know what? We're going to let loose. We're going to let my cam op come in and do what he does best, because he's a freaking genius. And my cam op is going to come in and he's going to shoot what feels right in this scene. And if it's in focus, great. If it's not, great. If we nail the composition, great. And if not, cool. Like, I love all the imperfect, like, handheld framing. There's so much of it, and it just feels very documentary-like, and that's adding to that kind of voyeuristic approach that you're talking about. And even some of the shots that you would think on another production would have just been like, no, we got to do that again. We're going to do it until we get it right. Like the opening, when we see that shot spinning around Rocket. Like, that's not even remotely close to being like perfectly composed. But it works so well. I love it for that. I love it for the imperfection, because it puts me in an emotional place alongside this character. And I would have liked it a lot less had it been perfectly composed. It would have been fine. Like, it's not something I would have noticed. I just wouldn't have engaged with it to the same degree. But whenever you're spinning around, you're having to track with this guy. You're like, okay, you're having to engage with the film because it's forcing you to keep up with what's where. And then you add on that, the extra layer for us being foreigners, that it's, in Portuguese. Now we're having to read it, watch what's happening, read. Like, you couldn't be more in tune with what's happening in this film. There's just no possible way. If it had been in English, you and I would have been a little bit less engaged. But because it wasn't, like, we are really dialed into this thing. And I love it for all of that. So many imperfect. And I trust that it was all intentional, because you get into some of these shots and they couldn't be more perfectly composed. Whether you're talking about on the beach, and you have those gorgeous wide angles of, the twilight hour, and stuff happening, or in the middle of the day whenever, he's trying to hook up with Angelica and they're on the beach and there's this gorgeous wide frame of them in front of the ocean. Like, they know exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it. But to do that, you have to trust your editor to know how to engage with the footage that you're delivering. And that takes a lot of trust for everyone. Because if you don't trust them, you don't do these things. You don't like take these risky, crazy, chaotic, out of focus shots. Because just like, I don't trust my editor to really tell the story the way we want. And so we're just going to be a little more conservative, and then you're going to go a little bit slower, and you're going to start extending the shoot longer than you wanted. All kinds of chaos kind of unravels after that because you don't have trust in your ecosystem. And it's just wonderful. The chicken cam, like, I love all the POV stuff that's happening in here, and it's just full of perspective, which is so necessary when you're jumping through all these stories. And to start off with a chicken cam, like,
yeah, it's great.
It's so great. Good because I wondered the same thing, and I don't know if they built something for that, but I assume they're just like chasing a chicken with the camera. But I'm sure there's BTS of that. Same thing. This movie's so picked over that I'm sure if we Google a quick BTS setup, it's probably someone shooting some DV footage of that exact thing happening, because it's probably really funny on set to be running around with the chicken. It's Rocky stuff. Chickens are very fast.
I can't imagine anybody got that close to a chicken, because there's one perspective of on its back, or like from its back,
almost underneath it, right? It's like right at its tail. And
like, I'm sorry,
you're on a bike. They got to be like on a bike with or some kind of dolly system where you're able to just push the hell out of that thing, and have your cam op on a bed, getting this nice low to the ground angle. Really cool.
I guess, but chickens don't run straight either. Like, how are you gonna get? I don't know. That's a behind the scenes I need to see.
You're probably pushing the chicken, right, to keep it in front of you, and to
you gotta be holding the chicken.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Don't the chicken eats the chicken. The fish don't eat the other fish. And so the chicken cam's so good though, because you're watching this chicken escape the butcher. We're watching all these other chickens get boiled and cut, and they're being prepped for soup. And then this one gets away. And so adding these little perspective moments, from this wide angle front shot tracking, the chicken, you feel bad for the chicken because you see what the other chickens are going through. But it's also kind of funny. And I feel like a lot of this film is playing with this violence, while finding some layers of humor to live and exist within it. And I feel like that's all represented on the front end with this chicken story. And great band name, by the way. And so, sorry, in the middle of a drink. But also, Rocket is the chicken trying to escape getting his head chopped off. And that's a very obvious, representation right on its face. And I love how at the end of that sequence, Rocket himself is in a chicken pose, right? He's trying to get the chicken, and he's kind of doing this very literal chicken, like he's got his arms kind of bowed out to the side, and he's doing this little chicken pose. Just in case if you're not really paying attention, they frame him up nice and rooster-like, and it's pretty fun. And so many POV shots, and it's all full of style, but it's also putting you in people's places. So like the truck towards the beginning, when they're talking about the Tinder trio and they're about to rob their first truck, this truck stops right in front of them. And I love that we get a POV of the truck coming to a stop. And it's not hard, right? You put a grill on a dolly in front of the lens, and you suddenly have a shot of the truck coming to a stop, with guns pointed at it. Like, that's so good. And it's so easy, but it also adds so much flair, so that you're not losing any part of this story. The bullet flying around the block, right? They fire off that shot, and it just suddenly starts ricocheting around the block, and you see we're about to hit this guy right in the crotch. Oh no, it's actually a side view mirror. Like, it's this really great fake out, but it's just ramping up the stakes and the tension, and anticipation, because you're like, okay, that bullet didn't find him, but one is. Like, where's that bullet going to come from? And so it's representing also the idea of living in this neighborhood. you never know what's coming around the corner, something that you just didn't see coming. Like the apartment story. Like we go into this apartment and then we freeze and then we jump around just to see how, Carrot finally got the place, or, Blackie got kicked out. Like, it's just full of this neighborhood, this city is just full of perspectives and stories. And I think my favorite one, because of its effectiveness, was Lil Z. Seeing him go from Lil Dice to Lil Z, because that's that moment you're talking about whenever they set it up really nice of all these dead bodies, and we're like, we know those guys didn't kill them. Who killed them? And so it teases you to ask this question, not answer it. We'll get back to that when it's necessary. But it's just sitting in the back of our head, and then we finally see who it is, because we definitely don't expect it to be Lil Dice, like this little kid. And then when you see it happen, you want to be horrified. And when you see his reaction to his first kill, laughing, you are. Like, is there anything more horrifying than that? And you're just like, oh my God. And then to jump forward in time from the perspective of his victims, it's so visceral, and it's so like leaving an imprint on your brain about who Lil Z is, that after watching Lil Z kill tons of people and knowing that he just does not care, he laughs. That was his reaction as a little innocent kid. And now with him as an adult, every interaction with him is heightened, because he's a psychopath. And you just expect him to kill anyone for no reason at all. Like, it doesn't even matter. This guy is so numb to the idea of taking life that there is nothing. It's not even a thought in his mind. And so it's just a really heightened thing. And that's why the contrast in this film is so good. It's so contrasty. To the point that they let the highlights blow out to retain a little bit more of the shadow. But even then, they crush the shadows a ton until they're just pure black. And it's exactly this. You said exactly what I was thinking. Like, it takes a lot of experience and intention of knowing how to still maintain your characters. If you're going to let all these black, dark skinned actors on screen at the same time. Now, you can get away with one black actor and not be careful about how you're retaining your shadows, because it's like, okay, we still see so much other people and characters and textures in frame that are retaining texture, in the shadows, that it's okay. Like, we'll probably not even notice it too much, especially if it's playing to, a white mainstream audience. But here you have tons of darker skins. And so you really need to know what you're doing, and knowing when it's okay to do it, and then how to compensate for that. So if they're going to be like, oh, we're shooting this scene in a alley and this black character is coming down the alley and there's no lights. There's like one light from inside the apartment and there's one street light, we're going to lose this guy. So how do we still maintain where he is and who he is? Okay, it's wardrobe. We're going to give him a shirt that has some highlights that will still catch. Like, we'll still be able to get that, because at the same time, you have to remember this is film. They're shooting on 35 and some Super 16. And so you need to have a very strong understanding of not just your film stock, but the entire post process of how it's going to be treated after the fact. And so that's a lot of testing. They did and it helps probably being from Brazil. You're already used to, shooting darker skinned, people. So it's not going to be like this, oh, my first time, I grew up in Canada, and I'm not used to shooting that many black people. Like, what do I do? They've got a lifetime experience probably, starting just like Rocket with stills. Like, oh, we've been shooting for years. And so familiarity helps, but also knowing here's our film stock, here's the look we're trying to achieve, and here's all the steps that we need to know. Okay, this character is going to be like 3 stops under middle gray. That's going to put them way crushed, because of the amount of contrast we're pushing. So let's try to get a little bit more light. Let's put them 2 stops under. And then whenever we do our post-processing, it won't be quite. We'll still have some texture in there. That'll give us just enough in this scene for whatever. But if you're not, so just tons of experience between all 3 of them. And then, prepping for sure. But some of those shots, bro, are so gorgeous. That shot of them in the tree and that leaf.
That's exactly the shot I was thinking of.
Oh my God.
You see every detail, and it's so beautiful. Did they do day for night? I feel like at one point there was one shot where they're shooting down on the tree so we can see the boys and then see the people walking through the forest. That was the only one where I was like, are they doing day for night? I can't tell.
I bet you're right. Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
God,
absolutely gorgeous. And I don't know. I think and day for night is always, I notice it always. When filmmakers use it, it's a great tool. But I didn't really notice it. I was just asking myself, did they do that? In that shot. Whatever they did, it looked fantastic.
Amazing. And so playing just with that high level of contrast really helps the emotional elements of the story. It definitely plays to the period, right? That we're in the 60s and 70s. So you have that feel like we're actually there because the same style is kind of what you would find out of a film from that era. And then the fact that they weren't really softening the light. You have so many speculars on their black faces so that if it's crushed otherwise, so that, we're losing detail where there's not light, it's okay because you have these speculars, but it also plays to this heightened sense of reality that they're all experiencing. And just knowing how that's going to play on these types of skin tones, genius and masterful use of the medium. This is a film to study for so many reasons, but at the same time, it almost feels more inspirational than utilitarian. How would you go about doing any of this?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. The performances being captured in this way, it's unbelievable. This is just one of the greatest films ever made, bar none. And going into and I think it plays into exactly what you were saying earlier, the voiceover, the use of voiceover and the use of titles on the screen. It's all popping in and out constantly to get us situated, right? He introduces a scene, introduces a character, talks about it, maybe even makes a joke, and then immediately leaves and lets the characters take over. So you never really feel like this is just a big montage, even though it kind of is, but because he's introducing a scene and then letting characters then talk, and the way it's cut so tightly, you just feel like your buddy is sitting next to you oh yeah, you got to watch out for this guy. You feel like you're at the park watching a pickup game or something, and you have a buddy in the stands next to you, and he's just kind of talking you through everyone. Oh yeah, that's Jimmy, man. He's got a killer 3. Watch this. And then suddenly the announcer is, running the play-by-play. It feels so much like we're just here for the ride. And then to see the things that happen, it's crazy and it's necessary. Having the voiceover, having the little sequence titles, what does he say? Flirting with crime. And these guys couldn't get themselves to rob anyone. And it's so good, but it also speaks to the nature of who they are. But having the voiceover there, you're covering so many characters and eras and storylines. We absolutely need these aids to let us know who we're focusing on right now and to tease upcoming storylines so that when we do eventually get to them, we're already a little bit familiar. It already feels like we know who this guy is and we have some context for, what's about to take place. And then there's a little bit of the shock of, I didn't see Lil Dice being this guy. And yet here we are. And now you really just don't know who anyone is ever. Because to that end, you're seeing Lil Dice become Lil Z, and you're like, my God, you don't see Benny becoming Benny. You're just oh, damn, this guy is actually super cool. What the hell? And then seeing Benny talk Lil Z out of killing Blackie is just this crazy turn of events because obviously Blackie ends up killing Benny by total accident, but it's speaking to this element of there really isn't a lot of rhyme or reason to who gets what in this, environment. It's not about people getting what they deserve. You can't take that away, or maybe you can't. I don't know. I never saw Benny kill anyone. Maybe he did and I just missed it, but it looked like,
of course he did.
Right. Coming up, doing at some point, same thing with like Knockout Ned. You don't see him getting killed by one of his own. He certainly didn't see it, because there's so much context. There's so much chaos and violence happening. You really don't know who you've offended in this universe. And to that end, and my last little final thought was about the story anyway, was just that final shot after watching the runts walk down the alley, like celebrating their killing of Z, is just like, this is the future. There is no resolution. And the fact that Lil Z didn't think anything of it to give these kids guns that he had like kind of terrorized, like he shot one of them in the foot, and then had one of his whatever up and coming soldiers kill the other one. It never occurred to him like, maybe I shouldn't give these guys a bunch of guns. To him, it was just like, this is life down here. We all know it. We all get it. And I'm the man. I've proven that no one's going to mess with me. And it's just this hubris of power that comes with, violent nature. And yeah, and to that end, I think the question that I wanted to throw out there for our listeners for sure, but also for you, and I don't know the answer to this. My feeling is no, but can you make an anti-violence film? Like, is that and I mean that by, we watch this, and if you're thinking about it, you realize violence and crime is a bad idea. Rocket got out because he never participated in crime. But he was still around it. He tried to will himself into it, and he couldn't do it. It just wasn't in his nature. And so he found another way out through photography. But I don't think most people watching this will take that away. Like, especially if you're a kid watching this, the most impressionable, right? You're going to watch this movie. You're going to be like, that was crazy, man. Lil Z got his. And then you're going to walk away, and just kind of the excitement of all the violence is kind of what you're left with. You're not left with a sickening feeling of, man, I should never touch a gun. And I don't know how many films, like we've talked about this in war films, like you can't really make an anti-war film. Right. It doesn't matter what you put on. It's going to be glamorized to some extent or another. Even if a film ends with everyone dying, you're going to be like, look what they gave their lives to. How glamorous. Man, it's good to give your life to something you care about. And it's just a different type of glamour.
Yeah. I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, because you have to show the violence in order to try to tell an anti-violence story. And I don't think this is like trying. I don't think you do either. I think that this is trying to be that. It's just telling a story, right?
Agreed.
And I think it's whatever you take away from that. So what I took away was, this whole thing was so stressful. How could anyone live like that? Like every single day thinking today could be my last day to die. And I know thousands of people in this country live like that, but this is how it's normal life for them. And I think that maybe that's the anti-violence aspect of it, is just how you feel watching it is super stressed and like, oh, I could never be a part of that, maybe, right? And if it's done right, then you love the people and you're stressed for them at the same time. I mean, even to a point like Lil Z is the worst. There is no redeeming quality for him at all. But I was imagining what it's like, what it would be like to be him, waking up every day, knowing that everybody wants to kill you, like that if it's either kill or be killed, like that's the vibe. And I'm stressed, I'm okay when he dies, like very okay when he dies, but I'm stressed for him. And so maybe that's the only redeeming, like, anti-violence aspect of it. At the end, I totally got exactly what you said, the repetitiveness of it. We start with kids committing violence, we end with kids committing violence, right? It's just a cyclical thing. And the reason is because they were given guns, but also like, what's the Ned? I forget his name. He dies because he killed that kid's dad. And it's it's amazing editing. Like, you know, he's almost a throwaway character, you know, when Ned shoots him in the bank. And yet he comes back, which is kind of the point. Like, every time we watch movies and people die all the time, in my mind, I'm thinking, that person, we talked about this, that person has a family, that person has a family, that person has a family, and they're all throwaway. It's all like, oh, they're just all dead, right? So how brilliant to remind us at the end, or towards the end, that they all did have a family, and there is going to be a cost to that. And here you go. Here's just one of them that you thought was throwaway, but we did show you, you know, because there were probably hundreds of others that they killed that, you know, maybe nothing happened to. We didn't need to see those, but we needed to see Ned shoot the security guard. So it is this cyclical thing that makes you kind of sick. And so maybe it's just however you feel watching it that reminds you how terrible it is. And they do an amazing job of that. I mean, yeah. So
yeah, and I completely agree. I don't think that was the goal of the filmmakers, for sure. And I just think it's an interesting question, because I think ultimately all artists, you know, more or less, would prefer violence to subside, right, and go away, and us live in a more peaceful, loving, you know, world. And a lot of artists try to achieve that through art, right? Through a peaceful means of, and so I think it's just a fascinating question, because if one of your desires in art is to make people think and make, you know, for a more peaceful world, can you do that through film in a way that's directly asking, you know, people to stop being violent? Like, and so, and I don't know. I wonder how many films can achieve an anti-message in a way that we're talking about, because I don't think you can do that through a war film, which is, I think, what Werner Herzog originally asked. I forget who it was. I want to say it was him, but I also, maybe it was Wim Wenders. Anyway, and so can you do an anti-gangster film? I don't know, because to some degree you got to show what it's like being in a gangster family, and whenever you start showing these things, the only way to do it is to let people see these are actual human beings. And once you start humanizing people, it inherently loses some of its anti-ness. I think the only ones of a genre that I can think, I feel like that's a pretty good anti-movie, which is an anti-drug movie through like Requiem for a Dream. I don't know if you can watch that movie and walk away thinking, I want to do drugs. Yeah. I don't think that's possible. Right. But maybe I just haven't watched it enough times, which I watched it once when it came out and was like, I'm good. Good. That's enough for me. Enough drugs. Mission accomplished, Darren. And so I don't know. I think it's a fascinating question, but regardless, I do still think it's important to hold up the mirror. And I feel like that's what this is. It's just holding up a mirror and saying, this is reality, this is society. And we're not here to pass judgment one way or another. I don't feel like the filmmakers were really trying to pass judgment on any of these characters, even Lil Z. I feel like they were just saying, this is reality. Here it is. What will you make of it? And then they just tried to make the best movie they could, along the way. And, obviously hats off. They mission accomplished on all those fronts. But Yeah, it's a wonderful film for a million reasons. It's obviously an experience, and afterwards will leave you feeling some kind of way. During, it's going to leave you feeling some kind of way. It took me minutes to recover from that kid getting his foot shot off. Like, my stomach was reeling. And they move on, fairly quick. And that's the reality. Like, life is going to move on very, very fast, and you got to keep up. And it's just, but yeah, definitely inspiring.
The apathy is crazy. And I just don't know. I hope all of these actors have more opportunities. They're just unbelievable. And the work that they did and the direction that was given, just, I don't know, were they inspired by the cinematography? Because it felt very voyeuristic in a lot of times, but were they inspired by the sets? Like, what brought this out of them? Because it's so unbelievably good. Hollywood actors need to take note of the way that these kids acted. And I mean the kids too. I don't mean, just the grown Lil Z, like they're all upper echelon, top of their game. And I just wonder, like, how did they get those performances? Anyway, just unbelievable. And it's weird because I don't want to watch it today, but I could absolutely watch it a week from now, only because, and that's saying a lot because how I feel about violence against kids, because of how good everything was executed. Yeah. Like you said, the editing, the directing, the writing, the acting, the cinematography, it's all there, and it's all freaking perfect. So I could watch it again next week just to take more notes. Honestly, why does this work? Like, the like you called it out, the panning around him when he's standing in front of the chicken at the beginning is sloppy. Why does that work? Why, if we're panning around Will Smith and that happens, that does not work. You know what I mean? It works because of everything that's happened before, everything that's going on right then. It's got to be chaotic and everything, and I get it. But the balls to do it also, imagine, you're making I don't know how much this movie cost to make.
3.3.
Oh my God.
Yes. Take that.
Oh my God. What? Just makes the case again, man. You do not need Brad Pitt to make a great movie. Oh my God. That is unreal.
It's so little. It's so, I don't know.
The film has to cost half of that.
They had to have burned so much film stock. Oh my God. Yeah. 3.3 would be like, I don't know, maybe 5 million today from whatever, 2000 when this was probably shot. I can't imagine this was edited very quickly. So, 3.3 million. Yeah. It helps too to not have a Brad Pitt. Just because that's where all your budget would go, right? But Alice Braga, went on to have an incredible career. She's still doing it, and she's at this point, pretty much a household name, I think, if not super close to it. Like, if you're a film nerd at all, you'll know who she is. But same thing, those two directors, obviously they've gone on to have really good careers. And I wonder how many of these other actors are, still crushing it. I looked up one or two of them, and they look like they've been just steady working ever since, which is awesome. Dude, I same, man. I kind of just want to study it a little bit more. And even from the storytelling aspect of how are they keeping us so well oriented, jumping in and out of different characters, different eras. It's just, I don't know. it's really masterfully crafted. And part of me wants to go back to the novel and see what how did he structure the novel? Was it cleaner and they messied it up for the screen? Or did they just steal the structure straight out of the novel? Because it feels very chapter-like from the book that I would imagine the book is doing. And then saying, okay, we're going to tell the story of the runts. We don't need a lot of time. This is like a 90-second story. And what are the good bits? Okay, we're going to show this, this, and this, and then we're out. And everyone's going to know the runts because the kind of iconography around them is so very distinct anyway. We don't have to do a lot. Like, they're little tiny kids. We'll know them when we see them. We might have to work a little bit harder with Lil Z because we're going to watch him grow up. Okay, how do we really make an impact there? Oh, well, we're just going to watch him murder 20 people in a row. Cool. Yeah, that'll do it. Like, it's just genius. God. Anyway, that's all I got, man. Any final thoughts?
No, just this is a masterful example of execution and love for making film. There's no other way to put it. It's hard to watch, but it's worth it if you can get through it. So yeah, absolutely fantastic.
Awesome. What are you gonna recommend this week?
Yes. So this week, where I had it here. Yeah. How have we not recommended this or at least covered it? I'm going to recommend Scarface.
Ooh, nice.
Fantastic little film with Pacino.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, go take a, go, I don't know, watch Sonic first and then, cleanse your palate a little bit and then go into this. It's another heavy example of like a kingpin idea, this time set in Miami. So
nice. I'm going to recommend another foreign film. This one is out of Mexico. It's called Amores, Perros. If you're a gringo, something on my Spanish isn't good, so don't mock me. Amores, Perros, something like that. And
nice.
So, thanks. Classic. This is Iñárritu's kind of coming out film. Like, he just set the world on fire with this one. Gael Garcia Bernal and a bunch of other names you'd recognize. Has some non-linear storytelling. We want to talk about heightened. So this has very strong City of God vibes. And I want to say they came out pretty close to the same time. And so there was just something in the water. But just incredible storytelling, very strong. And if you haven't seen it, highly recommend it. It'll make you feel some kind of way as well. So stay tuned for next week. We're going to take a look at something else coming out of the theaters called The Brutalist. We'll see what that's about. Stay tuned for that next week. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a note, leave us a review. If there's something you want us to cover, let us know. Or if there's something, you just find interesting, you can let us know that too. We like to talk. And so if you want to comment on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/City of God.
And this week, our quote of the day is from Al Capone. Find the toughest guy in the room, embrace him like a brother, and then slam his head against the wall. Wow.
And then wait 18 months for that guy to come and hit you with a baseball bat.
Yes, exactly.
Like,
you better kill the guy.
I love that coming from him because it really speaks to the mentality that goes into some of these people, right? Capone is obviously an infamous criminal from way back in Prohibition era who made his money off of violence and the racket of alcohol. Like, the government doesn't want to let us, then we'll do it on the black market and we'll do it anyway. And now we'll make even more money. And so that's this crazy mentality of this is what it takes to rule. But it's that same thing that's going to get you killed. It's a very short-lived life. It's bottle rocket, right? It's fast, it's bright, and then it's over. I don't know. It's gross, but I also understand it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if you're in prison, that's probably the best thing to do. Maybe that's why. Because didn't he go to jail? Did he die in jail?
I think he died in jail. Definitely went there. What, tax evasion, I think is what the story goes.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah. I'm somebody's bitch. It's just this guy.
Well, I'm really glad we did this film finally. And thank you for the heads up for the violence and the kids. You texted me last night. You're like, have you watched this yet? I gotta warn this guy. And it's that's such. I just want to harken back really quickly before we end this. One of the reasons why this film is so good is because, yes, I had a reaction to the kid dying, but I wasn't angry about it about the filmmaking aspect of it. And that just really, it actually made me love the movie even more because it reminded me, or it told me how much they care about me as a viewer as well. Not just about, we're going to make an unforgiving story, like everything be damned. It's we're going to make an unforgiving story, but we're also going to keep in mind that there are human beings watching this, and some things don't need to be. It doesn't need to be shock and awe. It needs to be brutal, but shock and awe. Some things are just for that, and this is one of those things that's like that. And they did it so tastefully. Yeah. I mean, really, it's brutal and it hurts you, and you need a minute after it, and you don't get it, but the execution of the thing was delicate. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And I guess pun not intended, the execution of the thing. But yeah, just so masterfully done.
Well said.
Thank you guys for joining us. I had a great time talking about this, Wes. Your insight, as always, helps me learn, and I love doing this every week with you. And hopefully you guys enjoy it too. Please subscribe, review us wherever you get your podcasts. It all helps a lot. And if there's a film you'd like to see us pick apart, talk about, recommend it. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll cover it. Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch the movies.